Took me about 5 years since I first talked about Loud House Season 1, but now I'm finally starting to talk about Season 2. It took me that long. God, well, at least the gap between this and my redo of Season 1 is smaller, so I guess that balances it out. Anyways, what are my thoughts of Season 2 of The Loud House? Well, it's mostly consistent. I don't know whether to say I like this more than Season 1. In terms of the worst episodes, there's definitely fewer episodes from Season 2 I could say I hated. Although this did come at the cost of some of the bad episodes being a bit worse than that of Season 1's. But the season also has plenty of great episodes as well, and some of them could actually rival some of my favorites from the prior and later seasons. Although it's the middle of the road episodes that makes it kinda hard for me to say whether it's better than Season 1. For most of Season 1's faults, I could at least say it had more memorable episodes. Mostly because they follow the trend of mundane life with a huge family. Season 2 continues that, but there are definitely more episodes to try to branch out of that idea. Whether they're having one character or a group of them get into some sort of shenanigan, that will mostly fit into the usual Nicktoon. And it only gets worse later on in the show, whether they introduce mythical beings or science fiction or secret agent stuff. Seriously, what the fuck was that trend of spy stuff? Like, what is this, Cars 2? Okay, but in all seriousness, while the second season takes advantage of how this show is animated, it isn't nearly as over-the-top or overbearing as the later seasons, resulting in it being on par with the original in terms of quality. But between the two, I'd have to give the slight edge to Season 1. I just feel like that season has a few more memorable episodes than Season 2. But regardless, Season 2 does still have plenty of great episodes. So it's time we take a look at the highlights and the lowlights of Loud House Season 2. Y'all know the rules by this point. These are all based off of my opinions, and you may disagree with me on some of them. And if you do, that is perfectly fine. And just like with the previous countdowns, I'm going to be alternating between the worst and best list. But anyways, with all that said, let's get started. Cheater by the dozen. In this episode, Lincoln and Clyde discover Bobby interacting with another woman, and when confronted, his nervous reactions raise their suspicions that he's cheating on Lori. At first they discover it was a misunderstanding, but later on he interacts with more people and it contradicts earlier claims. So they decide to dig deeper and search for more evidence proving he is guilty of being unfaithful. I can see this episode's problems from a mile away. All it is Lincoln and Clyde being suspicious of Bobby's behavior, and them eavesdropping on him to make sure he isn't cheating. And, oh wait, silly misunderstanding, he wasn't cheating on Lori at all. He was just preparing for their anniversary. Yeah, like nobody saw that coming. Doesn't help that most of the characters throughout this episode come across as unlikable. Putting aside how Clyde keeps escalating the entire episode, with stuff such as the 2020 rule plot device and his accusations against Bobby, he doesn't even attempt to be funny with it. When done awfully, the joke of him having a crush on Lori is so cringe-inducing. And when you add on how he forces this episode to happen, it just comes off as frustrating. And Lincoln's sisters are no better. When they overhear Lincoln and Clyde's discussion about how Bobby might be cheating on Lori, to a point that they were threatening him if he didn't explain everything, after they discover it was a misunderstanding at first, they act like it's Lincoln's fault. I think you're doing this all backwards. That's another thing. When they discovered the first instance was actually a misunderstanding, the writers pretty much shot themselves in the foot. Like, oh wait, I'm silly. Bobby isn't cheating on Lori. It was all just a misunderstanding. Oh wait, Bobby's now with another girl. Okay, he's cheating on Lori. At least this time they tried to gather more evidence, but it doesn't matter. We know that it's going to be another misunderstanding, and they try so hard to convince us otherwise. Like, they make a fucking bestiality joke with Lincoln suspecting Bobby's cheating on Lori with a dog. I'm not kidding.
Oh, yes, I love you too. Oh, such a pretty girl.
Disgusting. Now he's crossing species.
All your coins! Oh my god!
And that's most of the humor of this episode. A bunch of misunderstandings that are not funny. I think the only one that got a chuckle out of me was the preparation joke. I wasn't expecting them to do that kind of joke, and it caught me off guard in a humorous way. Also, I do appreciate how Lori is understanding in the end of the episode. You can tell her aggressive side has been toning down after season 1. Unfortunately, it's not enough to save this from being in the bottom 5.
So, what are you doing here?
I can't really get into that, but do me a favor and please don't tell Laura you saw me here. It's complicated. Thanks. Ciao.
Baby steps. Clyde discovers some odd behavior with his parents and comes to the conclusion that they might be preparing for another kid. So he comes to Lincoln for advice on how to be a good older brother. Lincoln agrees to help and teach him the ways of taking care of a younger sibling, but when put to the test, it proves to be quite a challenge. This is just a cute episode. As an older brother myself, I can't help but be charmed by these kinds of stories. It's nice to see Lincoln teach Clyde about the responsibilities of being an older brother, and it helps that anyone who's been in this kind of situation can relate to Clyde. I myself even recall the emotions I've been going through ever since my little sister came around. I'll admit, the reveal at the end did kind of feel like a bit of a cop-out, but I guess they didn't want to commit to something like that just yet. Also, the whole "it was all an act" trope that played towards the end of the episode, even that did kind of bug me. But the positives of this episode definitely outweigh the negatives. The characters, for the most part, are still likable, and there's still some good humor in this episode. Really, there isn't much else to say about it, it's just charming.
What if I give bad crush advice and my future sibling gets their heart broken? Or what if I can't choreograph a ribbon dance and they drop out of school and start holding up convenience stores? I'm going to be a terrible big brother. Clyde, you're spiraling.
No such luck. After Lincoln attends Lynn's baseball game, Lynn accuses him of being bad luck as she lost the game the one time he showed up. So he comes up with the idea to use this to his advantage and get out of going to his sister's activities. However, it's reached a point where he's excluded from activities by his parents as well, and even kicked out of the house because of how unlucky he's made himself out to be. So now he has to convince them that he's not bad luck and regain their trust. Whoo, boy, this episode. I feel like a lot of you were expecting me to put this a lot lower on the list. I remember when this first aired, and it was one of the most hated episodes of the entire series. And while I do think there are worst episodes from this season in my opinion, I'd be lying if I said I didn't understand why it was hated. Because there's a good reason for that. This episode is child abuse. Like, there's no other way around it. The way Lincoln is treated in this episode is so bad, to a point that if this were a realistic situation, the authorities would immediately take away custody of him, and he'd pretty much be taken to an orphanage or foster home. Oh yeah, he's being treated that badly. Now, to cut this episode a bit of slack, I can understand what it was going for. It wants to make Lincoln look like a bad person for trying to lie his way out of his sister's activities. And he ends up getting the short end of the stick as he keeps escalating this lie further. And speaking as someone who doesn't mind a bit of schadenfreude, I can see how this episode could have worked. But in practice, there are two major things that completely butcher this episode. The first problem is that all the fault isn't just on Lincoln. Actually, I think he's even less at fault than Lynn. This episode introduces her more superstitious side when it comes to sports. And after pretty much threatening Lincoln to go to her baseball game, when she ends up losing her first game of the season, she immediately puts the blame on Lincoln for causing bad luck. So much so that she warns everyone else about his bad luck. And it's this that gives him the idea to play into it. Thus, the episode ends up dragging Lynn into the problem. And the episode pretty much glosses over how much of a terrible person Lynn is for essentially letting Lincoln get kicked out of the house because of her superstition. Even when he confesses to the lie, she immediately responds with, "Well, how come after I banned you from coming to my games, my team ended up on a hot streak and we're now going to the playoffs?"
They did it. Unbelievable.
Honestly, I feel like the episode should have just dropped the scene of Lincoln being kicked out of the house. Maybe during the scene when Lincoln is locked out of his room, instead of pitifully going outside to sleep there, he loses his patience and marches straight into Lynn's room saying that enough is enough. And heck, if you still say Lincoln shared some of the fault, you could have Lynn respond with, "Hey, it's not my fault. You just keep proving time and time again that you're nothing but bad luck to this family." Lincoln realizes his mistake more naturally, having him confess that he lied about the whole thing and asked for one more chance to prove himself as lucky. The rest of the episode plays out the same, except Lincoln's not in a stupid mascot costume. And you have both Lincoln and Lynn learning their lessons by the end of it. But no, Lynn's superstition is pretty much glossed over by the second half of the episode. And she essentially gets away with essentially having Lincoln be abused for the entirety of it. Which brings me to the second issue and my biggest problem with the episode. Lincoln's parents are awful. Not only do they buy into the whole idea of Lincoln being nothing but bad luck, but they're just completely okay with excluding him from special family activities or everyday situations like eating breakfast or going to a movie, as well as kicking him out of his own fucking house.
Oh, sorry, sweetheart, but would you mind eating breakfast in the living room today?
I've got a big presentation and your mother's got back-to-back root canal patients. We can't risk your bad luck spreading to us.
These two are supposed to be the most sensible and responsible of the family. But no, that wouldn't be funny enough to brag in the advertisements, now would it? Why couldn't the episode have had them catch on to Lincoln's whole lie? You want to have him sleeping outside for a gag? Fine. But you could have at least had them bring him back inside to rest on the couch. Then when he wakes up, he confides to his parents about the situation. They give him a bit of a lecture, and they try to help him regain his sister's trust. There, I fixed one of the most controversial episodes of the whole series. The fact that a college student on the spectrum could figure out a solution as to how this episode could have worked, more than a whole team at Nickelodeon could, is kind of embarrassing. If they actually thought for a second about what they were doing, they would have realized, oh wait, what are we doing? And they could have went in at least one of the directions I suggested. Frankly, if it weren't for Lincoln deliberately trying to get out of his sister's activities, this would have easily taken the #1 spot. But even with that, this episode deserves all of the hate it gets.
Come on, you guys, be reasonable.
You're bad luck, Lincoln. You can't come.
Pet peeved. This episode centers around the Loud family pets as they come across a new dog the family takes in. Soon they take more attention to the new dog, much to their annoyance, so they try to frame the new dog into losing their family's respect. When those fail, they take drastic measures with animal control. This is one of those episodes that just appeals to me. While it is essentially a jealousy plotline, the episode takes the approach of minimal dialogue and character animation to tell its story, and I love it when a piece of media does that. Having growing up seeing a lot of shows like Tom and Jerry or Shaun the Sheep, I can't help but find some enjoyment out of these kinds of stories. With that said, I wouldn't exactly call this the best of its kind in that regard, because one of this episode's biggest flaws is that some of the jokes in this episode are just not funny. Like the running gag where they mistake the dog's butt for his face, or when Walt ends up taking a shit in someone's coffee. You know, those kind of jokes. But really, most of my problems with this episode are just nitpicks. I still find enough enjoyment out of this episode for it to be in the top 5. Could be biased, but I'm sure a lot of people can still enjoy this episode. And hey, this isn't the last time we see this kind of story. Not allowed. Lincoln has to present his birth story to the class, but he finds no evidence of his birth story. He goes to his parents, but they're clearly hiding something from him. So Lincoln decides to investigate the matter of his birth story and find out what his parents are hiding. This has got to be the most nonsensical episode of this season, and it's the starting point of them trying to jump the shark. Yeah, let's get the elephant in the room out of the way. Lincoln's birth story is terrible. We learn that around the time Rita was in labor, we learn that she and Lynn came across the president and the first lady and they decided to take her to the hospital. But due to tight timing, the first lady ended up having to help Rita give birth to Lincoln.
What?
What?
What am I watching?
I have no idea what the writers were smoking when they thought of this. I don't believe that the First Lady nor the President would ever go to a place like Royal Woods. Never mind help a bunch of strangers who are about to have a baby. It's impossible for me to suspend my disbelief enough for me to believe all this. The Loud House, at least in its heyday, was always a grounded show. And most of the times they did do stuff that feels outlandish, it was mostly relegated to characters like Lisa Loud, such as the different robots she created as well as the trash monster from War and Peace. Now don't get me wrong, I don't mind it when a show can get a bit cartoony at times. And the show has shown that they can over-exaggerate some situations and still make it entertaining. At least for me. But this? No. This strands way too far into jumping the shark. If it was just that, then that'd be one thing. But the thing that puts us above no such luck for me is everything else. For most of the episode, we just see Lincoln trying to figure out where he comes from with the help of Clyde. With some of their conclusions being that he's a science experiment, and he's an alien, and he's an Eagle Boy. You see the problem here? A large chunk of this episode is just nothing but nonsense. And the running gag with the field test is so painfully unfunny. The only conclusion they come up with that actually makes sense is that he has different birth parents. And it makes me wonder, why not actually go in that direction? I mean, it was a popular theory speculated before this episode came out. Now, I highly doubt they would have wanted to go in that direction because that is a very bold risk, as it would alter the perspective of the entire series as Lincoln is not blood related. But here's the thing, I'm certain that the writers could have made this work. A found family perspective does sound good for the show on paper. They just had to find the right pieces in order for it to make sense. That's not to say they'd have to do that, but I can see how Lincoln being a half or adopted brother would make for an interesting perspective. And I think it would have been much better than what we actually gotten. As is, it's just awful. The birth story itself is bad enough, but the build up to the reveal is so painful. If you ask me, I feel like this episode was only made to debunk the theory, and they did it in the laziest way possible. And that just makes this episode even worse.
Well, what time of day was I born?
Morning.
Night.
Okay, how much did I weigh?
9
7
pounds.
pounds.
What was the doctor's name?
Dr.
Dr.
Bernstein.
Patel.
What is going on?
Nothing.
At least you agree on that one.
11 Louds a-leapin'. In this half-hour holiday special, we see the typical Christmas celebration with the Loud family. But when Lincoln ends up getting his sleigh on the yard of his neighbor Mr. Grouse, he has to go over and get it back. But upon snooping in his house for it, he discovers a bit more about Mr. Grouse, including his childhood and his extended family. The sad thing about it is that he was planning to go meet them for the holiday, but he ends up not being able to, much to Lincoln's sympathy. For their first holiday special, this episode does a great job showing what Christmas is like with the Loud family. The vignettes between most of the siblings is really charming. From Lori resisting the temptations of opening presents, the different dresses Lenny makes out of Christmas decorations, Luna trying to find the right song for Christmas, Lola trying to act kind so she can end up on the nice list. I even like Luann's 12 puns of Christmas. There's a lot of charm in seeing the Loud family celebrate Christmas. But the meat of the episode is actually with Mr. Grouse, a side character who often berates the Loud family for being annoying. Through Lincoln trying to get his sled back after it ends up in his property, we learn a bit more about Grouse's childhood and his extended family. Most of his frustration doesn't just come from annoyance, but from envy, because he's unable to go visit them for the holiday, and seeing the Loud family all together for Christmas just makes him meaner.
It doesn't look like I'm gonna make it back for Christmas after all. I'm sorry. I know it's been 5 years, but I just don't have the money to travel this Christmas. Tell the girls Uncle Buddy says hi and loves them whole bunches. I miss you too.
So when we get to the Loud family and even the McBride family coming over to Grouse's house and share their Christmas cheer with him and give him the chance to reunite with his family for the holiday, it really hits hard. So yeah, this is a really fantastic holiday special. It's very charming and funny with the Loud side, and the heart of the episode with Mr. Grouse is really well executed. And I have no trouble calling it the best special in the entire show. And for the first of its kind, that's saying something.
Well, I know I haven't always been the friendliest neighbor, and I'm sorry about that. You've all given me so much tonight. Now I'd like to give something to you.
We take checks.
Making the grade. In this episode, Lisa requests to be bumped up a few grades and she settles into the 5th grade with her brother. But she ends up overshining everyone in her class, and this results in his friends resenting Lisa and even kicking Lincoln out of the group since he's related to her. So he decides to convince Lisa to try and blend in with the crowd. She ultimately does, but at the cost of her ditching her science stuff completely. which causes problems with their family and her old class. What a waste of potential. I made it very clear in my Loud Sister ranking that Lisa is easily my least favorite of the bunch. And my opinion on her has not changed, especially given her appearances in a lot of the newer episodes. Of course, I was a bit rash when I was discussing about that. I mean, keep in mind, it was one of my earlier videos. So I'll make this brief. She's nothing but an egotistical dumbass. She belittles and undermines everybody under the goddamn sun. She constantly puts other people, including her family, in grave danger, and sometimes doesn't even consider the well-being of others. She lacks basic common sense despite being the smart one in the family, and she doesn't even have the courtesy of being funny or likable to compensate for that most of the time. And that's just taking account of the first season. This season could have alleviated most of my problems with her if they showed her developing more as a character. In fact, Friender Fox, which is probably my favorite Lisa-centered episode, does exactly that. And this episode could have done that too. Instead, this episode pretty much exemplifies all of my problems with her and have her showing absolutely no character development. I don't care that it's a comedy show. Loud House prides on its continuity nods, as opposed to shows like SpongeBob that were comedy driven since day one. So when you have a protagonist that does the same shtick over and over and over again, and not have her show any sort of development by having her return to the status quo, it's gonna make him stick out like a sore thumb. Bear in mind, she's not the only character that falls victim to this. Don't take what I'm saying as something it's not. But from my experience, she's the worst example of it. But I think what really pinches a nerve inside me is that this episode's saying that she's better off as herself. That she doesn't need to grow or change, and that Lincoln is a terrible person for trying to change her. First of all, Lincoln never told Lisa to change. He just told her to try and blend in with the crowd. Dropping her whole gifted personality was solely her decision. And it pisses me off that the episode has the audacity to punish Lincoln for it. Secondly, no, she clearly needs to develop. We're talking the same character who uses her own siblings as guinea pigs without their consent, or even any concern, even after being constantly told not to. Maybe this episode could have convinced me otherwise by showing her strengths as the gifted child, and while it wouldn't make up for most of my problems with her, I would at least cut her the slightest bit of slack. But the examples we are shown are completely petty and contrived.
It's not my fault! The recipe is in metric, and Lisa usually helps me with the conversions.
I don't believe for a second that her family relies on her intelligence, because most of her previous appearances show that she just makes situations even worse. Heck, this episode kind of proves my point when she has the gall to tell her family that I'm completely out of the intelligence game, and you could thank Lincoln for opening my eyes. God, I hate this episode. They had the perfect opportunity to address all of Lisa's flaws and have her develop away from her egotistical side. In fact, the episode would have been better off if it just focused on Lisa. Maybe have it be a fish out of water story. You can have her age difference and overconfidence make her an outcast. And with her willingly trying to blend in with the crowd, we can learn about her strengths more naturally. But nope, all this episode did was exemplify why she's my least favorite Loud Sister. And when the episode told me that she was perfectly fine the way she is and Lincoln was an awful person for trying to change her, that was enough for me to put this in the bottom 3. If they just went in the other direction, I might not have been so hard on it.
Lisa, since you're new, I don't expect you to have...
Done. Interesting read, if a bit light on indigenous cultures.
Wow. If a former kindergartner can read the whole book this quickly, I expect all of you to do the same. By tomorrow.
Aww.
Fool's Paradise. April Fool's Day is approaching and everyone is trying to think of a way to prevent Luann from going all out with her pranks. They come across an ad for a clown camp and they decide to sign her up for it. Unfortunately, after dropping her off, the van breaks down, so the rest of the family has to check into the nearby hotel for the night. However, little do they know that they're in for a crazy night as the entire hotel is filled with booby traps. This episode amplifies everything I liked about April Fool's rules. with Luann orchestrating a hoax of pranks on her own family by making them think they were safe with her being in clown camp, and rigging an entire motel with pranks all over the place. Before you eventually piece together the whole situation, the tension feels really great, feeling like one of those horror movies where there are traps everywhere. You can tell the writers had a really fun time making her out to be one of those villain type characters with their prankster side. And thankfully, the execution was just as good as it was in April Fool's Rules. Maybe even better. One thing I forgot to mention when I was talking about that episode was that Luann pretty much got away with all of her pranks. Like, aside from Ronnie Ann, the catalyst who was helping Luann out, backstabbing her by throwing a pie in her face, there was no real punishment she received for pulling her pranks off. And while I stand by that episode being in my top 5, I did have to take points away from that episode because of that. But that's where this episode improves. While it does still carry over some of the harsher pranks from April Fool's Rules, such as triggering her little sister's rhubarb allergy and drenching another in bleach, it serves as a build-up to her ultimate downfall in the end, where her family uses all of her pranks against her, and nothing is more satisfying than seeing her get her karma. I could watch this scene over and over, and I would never get tired of it. All in all, I really enjoyed this episode and consider it better than April Fool's Rules. It's really engaging and suspenseful, funny, cathartic. There's no real topping it in terms of April Fool's themed episodes. Trust me, it doesn't get better than this.
Hang on, Lisa. We'll get you out.
Negative. Proceed without me. I'm safer in here.
Let's go.
Lincoln! The cricket!
Brawl in the family. The Loud family is under a sister fight protocol as Lori and Lenny fought over a dress they both bought. Unfortunately, the protocol causes Lincoln some misfortune and discomfort, so he tries to intervene and help them reconcile. But when it fails, he tries even drasticer measures by separating Lori and Lenny into another room. Unfortunately, this only escalates the fighting as Luna and Luann end up tangled into a fight, and one by one, every Loud sister ends up in some sort of fight. This is one of those episodes where just everything about it is wrong. Firstly, none of the characters are likable. I don't know who these unreasonable and sanctimonious girls are, but they sure as hell not the Louds. Literally all they do in this episode is undermine Lincoln and tell him to butt out of their situation, thinking he might make it even worse for them. And the catalyst behind this episode is that Lori and Lenny are fighting over a dress. Oh, for God's sake, they did not learn anything from one of the boys. So the rest of the family initiates a sister fight protocol to let them resolve the situation on their own without any interventions. The problem is that the rest of the sisters have to escort the fighting siblings as to make sure they don't encounter each other, which is hypocritical when they tell Lincoln to, and I quote, butt out and let them resolve it on their own. I get it, it's important to give two people who are fighting a bit of a cool-off period, but the way it's presented feels kind of oxymoronic when you really think about it. Mainly because the protocol is never really explained beyond those words, pretty much making it out to be nothing more than a plot device. Especially since supposedly Lincoln is completely unaware of this protocol, yet his parents and even Bobby know what it's all about? Huh? But you know, Lincoln has shown that he's able to resolve his sister's situations no matter what. Unfortunately, the episode has to have him hold the idiot stick, where, oh, it turns out Lenny and Lori already forgave each other, but with poor communication on Lincoln's part, they end up getting into another fight. Wow, that was completely contrived. And this isn't the only time they pull that crap. Lincoln is treated like the butt monkey of this episode, and when he loses his patience, he actually does try to adhere to the protocol by having one of the sisters swap places with another one for the night. But by the next morning, there's actually another sibling fight, because they each listen to their respective fighting sister's story and are fighting over who's correct. There's hypocrisy, and then there's this All this episode does is pile on Lincoln and make him look like he's a detriment to the family, which is bullshit. Yes, Lincoln has made bad decisions before and since, but we're talking about the brother who wouldn't trade his entire family for the world. The same one who helps them out in a tough situation, or putting their needs ahead of his own. Yeah, Lincoln is the worst character in fiction, my God. Throughout this episode, he's pretty much a victim of gaslighting by having him hold the idiot ball just so he can make the situation even worse. And the fact that the resolution ends up being that he leaves the house, and now all of a sudden none of the sisters are fighting anymore, it just leaves a sour taste in my mouth because of how screwed up it is. Oh, but you want to know the real kicker? Despite how much this episode paints Lincoln as the bad guy, you know who the real bad guy is? The Sister Fight Protocol. How do I know this? Every single fight the sisters end up in can be traced back to this protocol. Lori and Lenny were the first ones to fight and initiate it. Luna and Luann, despite being told not to butt into the situation, each listen to the respective sides of their story and end up fighting on who's the correct one. Lola and Lana end up miscommunicating and letting two fighting sisters get in contact with each other. Lynn and Lucy end up arguing over who's been slacking off while the other's been doing all the hard work. And one of them even tears apart Lisa's chart. With how all these arguments are incredibly petty and hypocritical, it makes the Sister Fight Protocol out to be nothing more than toxic. The fact that the episode tells us, no, shows us that it's Lincoln's fault, when in actuality it's nothing more than gaslighting and that the Sister Fight Protocol is a terrible thing. It makes you wonder if this is even the same family we've known since the start of the show. Seriously, this is the stuff that the haters of the Loud House say the Loud House is. If you were to ask me, I feel like the episode would have been better off if it reevaluated Lincoln's role in the family. Not as the screw-up, but the voice of reason. But if you want to have this Sister Fight Protocol, what if the sisters felt insecure about the way Lincoln treats them? Have them form this protocol to prove that they don't need him. The rest of the episode could play out the same, except this time Lincoln actually stays, especially since the only one who isn't caught in the fight is Lily. You have him protect her from the fighting, that way the sisters naturally realize that the protocol is only hurting them more than helping. Once again, it's a simple fix. As is, I think you get the picture. This episode was just infuriating. All this episode does is paint the Loud House as a toxic family. It's painfully unfunny. And the whole message of letting people resolve their issues on their own is practically nullified in the execution of the story. It's just a catastrophe all around, and it really gives Save the Date a run for its money. Regardless of which episode I personally prefer, there is no denying that Brawl in the Family is easily the worst episode of Season 2.
Oh, well, I guess I've learned my lesson. Always respect the Sister Fight Protocol.
No! No!
No!
Ellis for love. The Louds receive a love letter addressed to L Loud. Visioning their special someones, they work together to narrow down who the letter is for. The only one not as into the whole situation is Luna because she feels out of her crush's league. But eventually, it's narrowed down to the letter being addressed to her, asking her to go to a restaurant to meet face to face. You know, it's funny, with how Brawl in the Family made me question the family dynamic, with how they were presented in such a detestable and toxic manner, this episode is a great reminder of what makes them such a loving and supportive family. In a situation like this, it would have been so easy for one of them to be painted as unlikable. The conflict of the episode is the Loud kids trying to narrow down who sent them a love letter. And surprisingly, none of the characters come off as unlikable at any point. Sure, some of them do show genuine disappointment when they find out the letter isn't for them. But there's no moments of jealousy or trying to sabotage one another. They all genuinely support each other to find out who the love letter is for. Lola is somewhat of an exception, but that moment was played more for comedy, and she does still encourage those who are still in the running. Then at the end, we find out the letter isn't for any of them. As it turns out, the letter is a symbol of how their parents met, which is just so charming.
So I started slipping notes in his pocket as he passed by. By my third note, I got up the nerve to ask him to meet me here.
In fact, this episode has a lot in terms of charm factor. I mean, seeing all the Loud siblings picturing themselves with their special someone, I couldn't help but smile seeing them trying to interact with their crushes. But the star of the episode, however, is Luna. She's probably the most relatable character in this episode, as she's afraid to tell her crush how she feels, feeling like she's out of their league. I'm pretty sure a lot of people have been in that situation, even myself. And it's really compelling when we see her finally gather the courage to tell her crush how she feels. approaching it in the same method that her parents took, especially when this happens.
See you later, Sam. Okay, see ya.
Yup, we learn that Luna's crush is actually a girl, confirming that she's actually a bisexual. And yes, I now know that she is a bisexual and not a lesbian. I feel stupid for not realizing that. Anyways, this moment caught me off guard when I first saw it. At a time where I didn't fully understand the LGBT community, I wasn't sure how to respond to it. I mean, Clyde's parents garnered a positive reception for being one of the first LGBT representatives in Nickelodeon. And while I do appreciate them including a same-sex couple in a kids show and treating it like normal, if you take it away, Clyde's parents are just your typical overprotective parents. I can respect them for what they represent, but I would at least like something more interesting. That's where Luna and Sam come in. The episode does a great job foreshadowing this twist, with subtle details that hint Luna's feelings towards her, and never once does a character use a pronoun to give it away or contradict it. And episodes that follow up on their relationship, like Racing Heart or Perfect Gig, are fantastic. This is what I'm referring to when I want to see something interesting out of same-sex relationships. Because as someone who's not a part of the community, having genuine character interactions and development can make me respect it. You see what I did there?
Come on, at least put in a cricket sound or something.
Oh, right.
But even putting aside introducing a great character relationship, the episode is still amazing. It's one of the most charming episodes of the show. You have very likable characters and really nice interactions with said characters, and you top that off with consistently funny jokes. Much like with the Fair to Remember from season 1, this is an episode that just puts me in such a good mood. And I feel like that was really needed given the colonoscopy of Brawl in the Family. So yeah, I have no problems considering Alice for Love my favorite episode of season 2.
Gosh, you guys! The secret admirer is the mailman! He just handed me this letter. I don't feel the same way about him, so I let him down gently.
So those are my favorite and least favorite episodes of season 2. Honestly, I'm kinda relieved it's over. With how much I loathe some of the bottom entries, I should be surprised I didn't have a major freakout, but I'm pretty sure I expelled all of my anger out on SpongeBob Season 13. But I'm not really holding my breath with some of the next few seasons. But anyways, what are your favorite and least favorite episodes of the season? Let me know down in the comment section below. Also be sure to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell to be notified when my next video is coming out. And as always, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one. It's already on here, isn't it?